Hello and welcome back, friends, to another edition of Austin's American Flyer, where we continue to explore the transition era that American Flyer went through from approximately 1939 through 1946. During this time, just as a quick review, American Flyer released a new concept that was 3/16 to a foot scale, but this was done with existing O-scale track. So while it was a scale shell, the track was larger than the scale. And this led to, after World War II, what we commonly call post-war American Flyer S-scale, or S-gauge, which ran on two-rail track, which was more appropriately sized for the 3/16 scale. A few things about this video and the previous ones, and probably ones to come in the future. The more I delve into this era, and it's only been through the help of many of you that are contributing in different ways, the more I'm finding out I'm just scratching the surface. So if this series of videos has kind of whetted your appetite to kind of explore and uncover what happened during these years before the war, please delve into it. There's an incredible amount of interesting stuff as American Flyer bought Chicago Flyer, moved away from standard gauge, got into three-rail O-scale, and so on and so forth. And then in addition to that, there are many engines that technically we probably could consider predecessors to Flyer in some way, shape, or form that we're not going to talk about. One of those in particular, and probably the one that deserves the most attention that I'm avoiding, is the 060 switcher. You'll see a little bit of that today from one of the catalogs, but again, it looks very much like the 060s that we're familiar with that Flyer produced in the mid to late 50s. I also thought it would be helpful to mention that as I've tried to wrap my head around the whole reverse unit, the RDC versus the lockout lever, I'm discovering that there actually were subcategories within at least the lockout lever that we don't find in the S-gauge lines after the war. So again, there's just lots of details that are pretty fascinating that you will uncover if you get into this much at all. I want to just mention that Kirk, which has been absolutely tremendous in providing documentation and pictures of a lot of comparisons of pre-war and S-scale engines, he talks a little bit about some of the things he did with an 080. For some reason, probably more so than any of the other pre-war American Flyer engines, the 080 switchers just really struggled with metal fatigue, metal breakdown, expansion, and just disintegration of different components related to the chassis, the boilers, and the wheels. So it's actually very rare to find a pre-war 080 switcher that is in original condition and operating. So with that in mind, you'll see some links, and I'll mention this again when we get to that point, that will take you, if you choose to, some YouTube posts that Kirk and others have done of some of his equipment and operation. But please check them out. It's really fascinating to see these 080s in operation. One more thing I should probably mention is at the end I'm going to take a little delve into how you find things, especially playlists on the YouTube channel, just in case there's some of you that have thought, hey, did I miss a video or not? There's a way that you can actually check into different series through playlists. And like in the case of this particular series that we're doing, eventually all the videos will be contained in one playlist, so if you ever want to go back as a source of research or reference, you can go to that playlist. It'll pop open all the videos from this series, and hopefully that'll be a helpful tool for you. All right, let's get going.
In 1940, the K5 Pacific locomotive was introduced by American Flyer. It came in the new 3/16 or true scale model and had the number 559 or 561. The 559 came with the RDC control reverse unit, while the 561 came with the standard locking lever lockout reverse unit. Also to be noted, the 559 came with a die-cast freight and passenger cars, and the 561 came with stamped steel freight and passenger cars. Both numbers were available as ready-to-assemble kits that you painted and assembled yourself. In 1941, the armature was increased, updated, and the larger rear shaft and bearing remained in use through the S-scale production in 1947. Also in 1941, an operating choo-choo tender was an option, and this became the predecessor to the smoke and tender unit produced with the S-gauge line. As previously mentioned, the K5 was released in 1946 in the new S-scale version. It came with a road number 310, which was without smoke or chew, and the 312, which included an SIT, or smoke and chew in the tender. In 1940, American Flyer brought out a number 556 Royal Blue, and the production of this engine continued through the war until at least 1945. Some of the latest versions included a very soft metal shell that was probably made out of white lead. Also notable about the shells is when they were first produced, the forward-facing windows were open, whereas the later models, they were solid and unopened. Side windows were open on both versions. The 1940 version came with a lever lockout reverse in the boiler, and they were never sold with the RDC reverse unit. In 1941, the armature was upgraded, as in all of their steam engines, and this style of armature was continued through to post-war production. Also of note, in 1941, choo-choo tenders were introduced. These were the predecessors, as mentioned in the previous video, to the SIT tenders. You could get the Royal Blue with a matching New Haven number 490 Whistling Express baggage car that was painted in B&O colors. And this was part of the 4106 set. Also included were 2 lighted New Haven coaches. What's interesting though is despite having the choo-choo tenders available, they were not included in this set, whereas the Whistling Express baggage car was. Also available at this time was set number 4105. This was a B&O freight set that included the choo-choo tender, a number 555C, the number 478 boxcar, number 480 shell tank car, and a 484 lighted caboose. Fast forward to post-war days, and the Royal Blue was not released in the S-gauge version until 1948. And during the 1948 production run, it came out in approximately 4 variations, but then was stopped in 49. It again came out in 1950, and at this point included molded-in handrails. No matter which set was picked up, either the 48 or the 1950 sets, these were always included either as a separate engine or with freight cars, but there were never any passenger cars as they had done with the pre-war version. In 1941, nickel plate Road 080 switcher was introduced by American Flyer as number 574. It came with a standard lever lockout reverse unit. A new number 576B tender was cataloged for sale with an electric ringing bell. It was shown with the 574 and 5-car stamped steel freight set number 4120. A 575 was cataloged with remote directional control reverse unit, or RDC. It was shown with the electric bell ringing tender and included die-cast freight cars and the set number 4129. To the best of the knowledge that this person has accumulated through the years, it appears the ringing bell tender was never produced. The pre-war tender has sliding shoe pickups between the truck side frames, front and rear. A wire lead passes from the front tender shell through a rubber grommet to the field. The top of the tender shell has a narrower coal bunker than the post-war S-gauge version, and the pre-war version is more prototypical because of the smaller size. The idea is probably the S-gauge version was lengthened or the width increased to accommodate the SIT. The pictures you are looking at came to me from Kirk, and he says the following about his number 574 Oedo switcher. The locomotive and tender are original pre-war production. My boiler shell has flaws. It has some expansion and cracking. I stabilized this by filling the cracks from the inside with super glue. One flange on the right side that the forward linkage rod attaches to broke off. I epoxied it back in place. The rear cab had to be epoxied where the right side lower handrail passes through. The tender is attached to the cab drawbar strap with a screw. I do not know if this was from the factory or if someone changed the cab strap at some time. I've not seen this in any other 3/16 O gauge until the 46-565 Atlantics. My chassis has expanded and axle alignment was beyond usable specs. I replaced the chassis with a 1947 SIT chassis from a S-scale number 342. I widened the S-gauge chassis with aluminum plates to match the pre-war width. The drive wheels were bad on the original, so I used the S-gauge drive wheels and had O-gauge wheel steel rims machined and pressed on. My reverse unit, armature, and field are all original pre-war 574 items. And finally, in 1941, American Flyer introduced the Atlantic. This came out with a number 565, and it carried a single lever lockout reverse unit. It was sold with either the 564 stamped steel tender or the 564C that included the choo-choo unit. Production of the Atlantic continued post-war through 1946. The pre-war tender for these has a sliding shoe pickup between the truck side frames, front and rear. A jack pin receiver was riveted to the front of the sheet metal tender. A single wire from the reverse unit is connected with a pin to the tender, and the drawbar from the tender connects with an open eye to a pin on the locomotive drawbar strap. The indented side space in the tender has American Flyer Lines decals. The first Atlantics produced in 1941 included boiler shells that had a rolled flared top on the smokestack. This was changed during the 1941 production to a straight smokestack. The educated guess is that the stamping process or rolling process involved with creating the flange on the top of the smokestack caused enough damage to the early boilers that it was abandoned and replaced with a simple straight smokestack. The flared returned back to the Atlantic smokestacks following the war with S-gauge when they changed from a 4-piece to a single-piece cast shell. It then disappeared again when they transitioned from die-cast to plastic Atlantic shells. During the early 41 production of the Atlantic, the long handrail was soldered to a cotter pin at the boiler front by the smokestack. There was an unused hole at the top by the boiler front. This hole has a cotter key in it later in 41 production, and the handrail is no longer soldered. This hole is not present in 45 or 46 productions of the O-scale Atlantic version. During the early 41, the bottom of the handrail is bent and goes through a hole in the boiler shell. Cotter keys are used in later 41 through 46 production at this location, eliminating the final bend in the handrail. Early 41 Atlantics have a font that has a larger height with a skinny print number. Later productions use a smaller height with wider numbers. In 1945, the tender shell is modified with a stamped hole/tab in the center of the side along the bottom. The suggestion is that this had to do with increasing the support along the frame of the tender. This continued through the 46 O gauge production as well as transitioning into S gauge shell production. In 46, the tender drawbar is attached to the cab drawbar strap with a screw, the same as the S gauge production. The wire from the reverse unit is now attached to the tender with a fan stock clip. The indented side space of the tender has the word Reading rubber stamped in silver. Most 46 tenders as well as 46 freight cars were produced with no bearing journal covers. Those manufactured that way have blackened axle ends installed. The guess here is that the nickel plate parts were reserved for the new S gauge production line. In 46, the S gauge Reading 442 Atlantic was introduced as the 300 in S scale without smoke and choo-choo. The artwork in the catalogs from 46 show a 301 Atlantic with the train sets, and as the one designates choo-choo only, the conjecture is there was a plan to include either a choo-choo tender or choo-choo only with this early model, but it never became a reality. It's also worth noting that there are some 46 and 47 Atlantic tender frames that have cutouts for a smoke and tender unit. These cutouts are not the same as in the pre-war 565C choo-choo tender frames. So it is possible to install an SIT in one of these frames with some modifications, and some people have done this, even though they were not produced that way from the factory. A few notes about the early 300 pictured here from Kirk. He says, "My 1946 S gauge 300 had a hard life before it found its way to me. The coupler was converted to knuckle, the tender shell was soldered to the frame because the tabs were broken off. The bearing journal covers were painted black, as were the boiler shell handrails. The center of the boiler front is painted red. The cab numbers, tender lettering, and rear ladder were all blackened out. I installed the silver script and cab number rub-on transfers."
So I've heard that there are those of you out there that are losing sleep because you know that you've missed a video out of one of the series I've done. So I'm here to help. And also those of you that deal with insomnia, laying awake at night in bed wishing you could sleep. In both cases, I've got a great solution for you. Open up your browser, go to YouTube, type in Austin's American Flyer, unless you've already got a bookmark, which, you know, probably you already do. And you'll see a page similar to this come up. It's got some different things on it, and you want to go to the spot that has this icon. Click on that, and that'll take you to my home page. And what I wanted to share with you is just a couple things about the organization here, because sometimes I take for granted that people may not understand all that's at their fingertips. So first of all, on the home page here, if you just scroll down, you'll see the most recent videos. You'll see the most popular videos, and they do list some of the playlists here as well, and so on and so forth. So there's some different ways that you can kind of organize what you're seeing, but the main thing I wanted to show you was playlists. So here you see you've got these different ways that you can organize the videos. And if we click on playlists, it'll take us to this screen. And here are many, many, many different playlists, and I keep expanding the playlists that are offered, trying to think of better ways to organize with one goal, and that is to help you be able to find stuff. If you, let's say, for example, you have a 302 and you want to work on refurbishing it. Well, here's a playlist. You can click on View Full Playlist, and it'll show you some videos that I've done on 302s. And every time I do another one, I'll add it to this playlist. So this is something that will keep advancing over time. The playlist will keep getting larger and larger. And I've got several engines listed: 326, 322, streamlined Pacifics, the Royal Blue. A lot of videos on those, just probably because I like them so much. 301, 300, we've got 060 switchers, we've got Baldwin diesels, we've got Alco diesels, on and on and on and on and on. So, something I wanted to show you in terms of playlists. And currently, right now, we're working on the O to S transition video series. So here are these. So as you can see, there are currently 3 videos in this playlist, and right now you're watching the 4th. And so again, this playlist will continue to expand as more videos are added. So there you go. Hopefully this will help you guys that have been so concerned about the videos you've missed out on, and those of you that deal with insomnia. Always trying to help here at Austin's American Flyer.